Do you guys want to see something really cool? So I've been working on my 2023 NFL draft big board for about a month now, and it's finally complete. Now I have over 200 players fully graded and ranked as well. But let's get into this video. So some of you may ask, how do you get these grades? What do the grades actually mean? As you can see, Bryce Young 6'5", Bijan Robinson 7'0". Well, let's look to the left-hand side. We have the grading system. So to start off, we have blue chip prospects. In this draft class, I have 3. I've made a video about them, of all of my 3 blue chips. So now an 8, it goes from an 8 to 5 scale. And an 8 is the perfect prospect. This is a prospect who has almost no flaws and, will become a Hall of Famer one day. And then you have a 7.5 to 7.3, which is a perennial All-Pro. And then a 7.1 to 7.0 is a Pro Bowl potential. You can already see Bijan Robinson has a 7.0 already. That's where I think he is a blue chip prospect. And then you get to the early first round grade where you have a 6.9 to a 6.8. He's a quality year 1 starter. He's going to come in and he's going to play very well. And then you have a mid first round grade. This is going to be a good start of year 1. He's going to produce. He's going to have an impact. But is he going to be in the Pro Bowl conversation? Is he going to be in the top 10 conversation? It's potentially. That's why he's a mid first round grade. And then a late first round grade. To preface, I have a lot of late first round grades in this draft class. He's going to be a year 1 starter. He's going to come in and he's going to be slot in at that position immediately. But there's also a different qualification for 6.5s depending on what website you look at. Some people have a 6.5 as a boom or bust potential. This is the Anthony Richardsons of the world. That's why he's a 6.5. And then a 6.4 is the second degree of a late first round pick. These are guys that are going to be a good starter within 1 to 2 years. And then moving on to the early second round grade. This is mainly a 6.4 to 6.3, but I mainly put him in 6.35. He'll be a starter within 1 to 2 years. Maybe not a good starter, but he will be a starter within 1 to 2 years. So a late second is going to be an average starter to an above average backup. This is a guy who either will be starting due to an injury, or will be a really good depth piece. So that's a late second round grade. An early third round grade is going to be a 6.2. He's going to be an above average backup to a potential starter if an injury happens, or if he is able to win a positional battle. A late third round grade, this is going to be just straight above average backup. He is going to come in and he's going to play, but he will not be the everyday starter, and he could potentially be a role player, but that's what that grade means. And the fourth round grade, you've got developmental traits. You either have a lot of really good traits, not a lot of production, or you could be a player who played really well in college and has some question marks about translation, so that's going to be a fourth round grade. And then a fifth round grade is going to be an average backup. So there is a little jump between above average to average developmental traits, but a fifth round grade, average backup. Sixth round grade is going to be a backup for special teams. Seventh round is going to be a roster spot to practice squad. And then an undrafted is a 5.6 to 5.5, which is priority free agent. And then a no grade is in black. If I wasn't able to get to that player, if I didn't know about them. And then a sub 5 or a 5 flat is going to be, he is not an NFL player. He is not going to make a roster spot, and, he won't make the NFL. But let's start with the actual big board. I have 202 total graded players. As you can see here, I have every single position, and I have quite a few with a lot of positions. All right, so my overall views on the class is that I think it's an okay class. It's on the weaker side, of course. We've seen, 3 draft classes, even 4 if you count the 2019 NFL draft class, that have looked better. The prospects have been, graded higher, in my opinion, better players. And then I think that the upcoming draft class in 2024 is better than this class. I have it as a 5 out of 10 because I think that there are 4 solid positions that will produce highly at the NFL level and produce Pro Bowlers. And then I think that the quarterback and wide receiver classes will produce some solid players and some guys that, for wide receivers, gain 1,000 yards. For quarterbacks, get over 3,000 yards and over 30 touchdowns. However, they're going to account for half of a point. Each of the green account for 1 point. The yellows are a half, and then the reds are -1. So I think the interior offensive lineman class, the offensive tackle class, interior defensive lineman class, inside linebacker, and safety class, I think they're all weak. weak classes, I don't think they have that much depth, and there aren't many potential Pro Bowlers in their respective groups. But then getting into my actual rankings and my grades for each positions, you have the quarterback class where I have Bryce Young as my top, Anthony Richardson as my second, CJ Stroud as my third, Will Levis as my fourth, and Hendon Hooker as my fifth quarterback in the draft. Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, and CJ Stroud are all going to be late first round guys. I've made a video on Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson about why I came to those grades, and then CJ Stroud I think is one tier under them. I like CJ Stroud's accuracy a ton, but I think he does have a lower ceiling than these guys. I think he's around Jared Goff levels of production. And then Will Levis and Hendon Hooker, these guys are both, I think, heavily overrated within the draft process. Hendon Hooker, I have a late third on. He's not good at feeling pressure. Yes, he did have 29 touchdowns and 2 interceptions and was second in passer rating. But, 25, torn ACL, not good under pressure. And then you have Will Levis, who's another guy who had a really high sack rate, who I have an early third-round grade on, who, can project. He can project in the NFL. He could be maybe a Herbert kind of guy where people are writing him off. Kentucky had a bad roster last year. He only had 19 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. But that's my grade on him. And then you have the running back class, which I really like. I have 20 graded running backs here. Bijan Robinson is my top. Obviously, I think he's a Pro Bowler. At minimum, one Pro Bowl, in my opinion, disregarding injuries. And then I really like Jahmyr Gibbs, best pass-catching back in the class. Israel Bonaconda is also really good, I think. He's going to be a good speed back in the next level. Charbonnet, I think he's a good pass-catching power back. And then Mohamed Ibrahim, another guy, speed back. Dwayne McBride, another power back, really good guy. And then this class also has really good depth, which I like, and that's why running back is my third highest graded position. The wide receiver class is pretty interesting to me. I got a guy like Zay Flowers, who was my sixth highest rated player in the draft class. Spoiler alert for the top 50. And I have him as a mid-first round grade. And then Jack Smith-Njigba, who I'm also high on, who I think could potentially be a Pro Bowler in the slot. But then I think there is a fall-off, and I don't like the depth in this wide receiver class. We've seen a lot of classes with high wide receiver depth. Last year, 2020, 2021, you had 2019 was an insanely deep class for wide receivers, produced a lot of 1,000 yards. But then Quentin Johnson, I have some question marks on him. I'll explain this more in the top 50. Jordan Addison, smaller guy, 173 pounds, not the greatest after the catch, not super athletic. Had an inflated year at Pitt where he won the Blitnikoff. And then Jalen Hyatt, who I've also made a video on my TikTok at Big Reeks YT. I don't think he runs routes really well. I think he's only a primary deep threat in the draft class. And then Josh Downs, this is another smaller guy who also isn't the fastest and most explosive wide receiver, but I think he can still produce. And then Tank Dell is a guy that I know a lot of people think is a massive sleeper in the draft class. I like him. He is in my top 50, but 165 pounds is really, really hard to translate. That's like putting me in the NFL. Tank Dell's 5'8", I'm 5'8", 165. I'm 5'10", 165. That's like slapping me in the NFL, but give me like a speed boost. But I think Tank Dell could be potentially an elite returner, not only an elite returner, but also be a good producer in the slot. Just need to make sure he doesn't get hit too bad. You got a guy like A.T. Perry who is, a 6'3", 200-pound receiver, but he doesn't combat contact well, but he's a good route runner at 6'3", so he's like a smaller 6'3" build guy. You want to see him use his physicality more. Cedric Tillman, who I think is pretty underrated in this class. However, 1 year production, coming off of an injury, but I think this guy's a big sleeper in the draft class. And we could see him becoming a top 5 receiver in this draft class when it's all said and done. And then you got Marvin Mims, Jalen Reed, Charlie Jones. These are my late third-round guys. Xavier Hutchinson, Rashee Rice, Tyler Scott, Trey Palmer. And then we get to Keyshawn Beauty, or Keyshawn Butte. I call him Keyshawn Booty because I really think Keyshawn Butte has a chance to go undrafted, but he doesn't. But I do not like Keyshawn Butte. He has massive character issues. He athletically isn't good. He didn't have any production last year at LSU. He stormed off the field second game at LSU, and I don't think he even projects that well as a prospect. And hell, I even had him in the first round last year. I was high on him this year. But, Moving on to the tight end class, I really like this tight end class a lot. Dalton Kincaid is somebody I'm very high on. Michael Mayer, I think, is a very, very solid, safety net of a tight end. Darnell Washington has a humongous blocking upside at 6'7", and did that at Georgia. And plus, he has a red zone threat, really high potential with red zone threat levels, kind of like a Jimmy Graham guy, except he's not going outside as a wide receiver. Luke Musgrave is an athletic freak. He's like the Anthony Richardson of the tight ends. At Oregon State, another guy who was a Senior Bowl standout. Tucker Kraft, really good. And then Luke Shoemaker is another guy out of Michigan who I'm also high on. Sam Laporter, Davis Allen, Zach Kuntz, athletically was a 10.0 at Old Dominion, however, had very limited potential. He's a really good example of a 6.0 grade where he has developmental traits, that athletic 10.0 RAS. However, limited production, only 10 catches and 100 yards in an injury-riddled season at Old Dominion. And then you got some pretty good depth here, too, with Cameron Latou, Josh Weil, Will Malroy as well. And then Brendan Strange, I think arguably could have been a fifth-round guy for me, but I put him in the sixth. Moving on to the offensive tackle class, of course, I've already kind of alluded to the fact that I don't think that this is a really good offensive tackle class. Guys like Broderick Jones and Anton Harrison, I see a lot of people don't even have them as first-round grades, or even as a late, they have them as either going in the second or having a second-round grade on them. But the big outlier here is you see Peter Skronsky and Cody Mauch, who are both listed as offensive tackles in this draft class, and who I see offensive tackle guard. However, I think these guys are both projected as guards, and I think they could both be that. Cody Mauch is a guy with 32-inch arms. He's in the second percentile for arm length. Peter Skronsky is in the fourth percentile for arm length, eighth percentile for wingspan. And of course, I've done my prospect breakdown of him, which you can find on my YouTube channel, where I think he projects as an actually good guard. I have him as a 6.4 late first round grade as a guard, but I don't think he'll do well at tackle. If he was in tackle, he would be right under DeWand Jones. And then Cody Mauch probably would have had an early third round grade if I put him as a tackle, because he's another guy. Yes, he's a mauler. Yes, he's really good in the run game, but he's raw in the pass game. He's from North Dakota State, which is an FBS school. At FCS school, he'll have to, curve to the NFL level of learning and the speed of the game. And I think guard probably fits well for him best too, due to his arm length. But moving on to the tackle class, Broderick Jones, I think that one of these two I think are the best technically sound offensive tackles, with Anton Harrison not the most athletic out of Broderick Jones. That's why I have him slightly above Anton Harrison. But Broderick Jones, he's a 21-year-old redshirt sophomore from Georgia. He's come in there and produced his both 2 years of starting, allowed 0 sacks, and set to Bennett. Anton Harrison is a guy who just allows no pressure. He allowed the lowest pressure out of Broderick Jones, Peter Skronsky, Paris Johnson, and Darnell Wright. Paris Johnson Jr., I do have an early first-round grade on, due to the fact that I don't think he's athletic, he has the NFL size, but I do think he is less technically sound, and he's more upright than I would like him to be. So if you get a really, really strong or really bendy edge rusher, they're going to get around him. But Darnell Wright is, I think, the best right tackle, or a true right tackle in this draft class. Really like him out of Tennessee. I think a team like Jacksonville should definitely target him. If you see his film against Will Anderson, you'll know why he's my fourth tackle in the class. He's just, I think, could be a potential stalwart right tackle. However, he's a right tackle, lower positional value than all these left tackles. But I really like Darnell Wright. DeWand Jones, humongous monster, 6'8", like 360 pounds. He's got like an 84 or something inch wingspan. Humongous guy, another pure right tackle. However, raw, and it's hard to project humongous offensive tackles because, guys like Mekhi Becton, we've seen them be heavily injury prone, and he is still raw. Then you got the depth here, which I think takes a massive drop off with Matthew Bergeron, and then Blake Freeland, who was a combine standout, Tyler Steen, Carter Warren, Brandon Daniels, Jaden Duncan, Wanya Morris, and then another big drop off from the 5th and the 6th round for offensive tackles. Interior offensive line, I've already talked about a little bit with Peter Skronsky and Cody Mauch, but let's look at the true interior offensive linemen like O'Cyrus Torrence, who I think is actually going to be a really good player in this draft class. Have him within my top 10. He's not only a really strong run blocker, but he's also a very smart player. You constantly see him calling checks on the line and adjusting to defenders' leverages, and he's also very good at picking up blitzes and switching. Siren Torrance have him as a 6'5". Peter Skronsky, of course, I've already talked about a lot. John Mitchell-Schmitz is a center prospect that I like a lot. Pass blocking, he's still a little leaky. However, as a run blocker, he's definitely really solid. I project him as like a Ben Jones kind of center, like a run heavy center. And then Steve Avila out of TCU, Joe Tippmann, Andrew Voorhees, Luke Weipler. I think there just is a massive kind of drop off with the interior offensive lineman class. Finally, moving on to defense with interior defensive line. If Jalen Carter poofed his way out of this would potentially be one of the worst interior defensive lineman classes I have personally seen. I've done 3 draft classes, and they've all had better classes than this. I don't want to be too critical of it because Jalen Carter heavily carries it. He's a guy who I think is a potential All-Pro. I think he's a perennial Pro Bowler. But then Kalijah Clancy, I think, is massively overrated due to the combine. He's not Aaron Donald. He does not have his frame or the strength of Aaron Donald. Kalijah Clancy sometimes does get blown off the line. Yes, he is a good pass rusher. But look at Jerry Tillery, first-round draft pick, another guy who was smaller. He was around like 290, 300 coming out, routinely blown off the line and run defense. Kalijah Clancy sometimes happens. And then Brian Bresee, obviously, I've talked about him on a numerous occasion in my mock drafts. Had some personal issues over the offseason, had some degenerate issues. No. Brian Bresee, somebody that I've talked about a lot within my mock drafts. He had a lot of injuries, and so he had some personal battles at Clemson, but lower production, but a really good athlete, and that carries him a lot. And then Saiki Ika, I like a lot as a nose tackle at Baylor. But also I don't think he has the high ceiling. He has some decent pass rush moves, but I think is a pure nose tackle at the next level. And then you got guys like Mizey Smith, Jelani Roy, Keon Benton, who are these third-round guys. And then I think there's some good depth in the interior defensive line class, but pure star power, it's just Jalen Carter, and that's it. Getting to my edge class, this is the largest amount of players I've graded. As you can see on the top, there are 27 currently graded defensive line, or edge, sorry. And starting off, my favorite 2, I got Will Anderson, Tyree Wilson. These are both top 5 guys that I have. Will Anderson is my 2nd highest rated player. Tyree Wilson's my 5th highest rated player. Really like those guys. I've already made a video on them describing why I like them. But then you get to the depth, and I think there is a slight drop-off from where you have Will Anderson, Tyree Wilson, to Nolan Smith and Luke Van Ness. I think these are the 2, debating who is edge 3. You got Nolan Smith, who has elite bend, elite character traits. He was a captain at Georgia, senior, is universally liked, great at interviews. And then you got Lucas Van Ness, who is a speed edge or a speed to power, lengthy edge rusher, a guy like George Karlaftis coming into the draft last year. So they battling between who is edge 2. I would prefer Nolan Smith because I think speed rushers are getting they're getting higher opportunities and they're thriving more. We saw Hassan Reddick in the NFC Championship game absolutely wreck the 49ers and Mike McGlinchey. Now, Hassan Reddick was a guy like Nolan Smith who had not character issues. He had concerns about his weight. Nolan Smith is 238 pounds. Hassan Reddick was like 240 flat. Nolan Smith was also elite at the combine. He ran a 4.38. So if Nolan Smith can just be a rocket off the edge and use his bend the right way, he could totally become even higher rated than Tyree Wilson. But I do have concerns about his size, of course. And then you have the obvious depth in this class. There are a ton of players graded within 6 to 6'3". You have Miles Murphy, who's could potentially be an elite run stuffer, lower pass rush upside. He's got like him and Tyree Wilson are kind of in the same conversation as those potentially elite run defenders and players that set the edge. But I think that Myles Murphy sets the edge a lot worse than Tyree Wilson. That's why I have a 6.3 grade on him. Sometimes he can be led to the sideline or led inside of the offensive line that can create holes in the run game. And he doesn't use his length as much as I would want him to. And you got a guy like Keion White out of Georgia Tech who, is a potential first rounder in some people's eyes. In my eyes, I think he is a second round guy. He had also pretty good combine at Georgia Tech, but it's hard to project Georgia Tech edge rushers a lot just due to the competition they've kind of faced. And then Will McDonald's the guy that a lot of people are high on, another smaller edge rusher, around 280, and not the greatest technique wise, but he does have some potential and some juice off the edge. A trend that I really see in the edge class is how I think there are like certain big like bubbles for the edge class. And what I mean by that is like you got Will Anderson, Nolan Smith, Keion White, Will McDonald, Adetomiba Edebaware. These guys are like speed rushers. They're pure speed rushers who have been and who are going to get after the quarterback. But then you got other guys like Tyree Wilson, Luke Van Ness, Myles Murphy, Isaiah Folsky, even Andre Carter, who are just really, really big and lengthy edge rushers who aren't the fastest off the line, who don't have the greatest first step, but are going to be elite run defenders, in the class. So I think that gives it a kind of an edge because, you might miss out if you really want a speed rusher or a primary pass rusher and you miss out on Will McDonald. It's okay because you can get Adetomiba Edebaware a few picks later. If you don't want to risk a top 5 pick on Tyree Wilson, you could maybe draft Myles Murphy in the late first instead, and they could produce and Myles Murphy will produce slightly less than Tyree Wilson as in run defending wise, but you don't have to give up a top 5 pick for that elite run defender. And if you don't want to draft Will Anderson, you could go with a guy like Nolan Smith in the late first round if you want elite edge, a bend and speed off of the edge. And then another positive about this edge rushing class is that the depth is really there. You like Will McDonald, Isaiah Folsky, Adetomiba Edebaware, Bijol Ojulari. These guys could all be argued, and these guys can all potentially either go in the early second, late second. Guys like Myles Murphy and Keion White, who I have as late second round grades. These guys could even go in the first round. Andre Carter, Tua Tuipulotu, Felipe Nduke Uzoma, Derek Hall. These guys are like second and third round guys. These guys will be quality edge rushers. These won't be bottom of the depth chart guys. These could be potential starters. Now, after talking about the edge class for a while, I'm moving on to the inside linebacker. This is where I think there is a massive drop off in overall talent. I think there are really 4 solid linebackers from this class, but then I think after Henry Tuiyotu, these guys are just a tier down. None of these, I really don't think any of them are Mikes. Drew Sanders is like a hybrid pass rushing strong side linebacker. Jack Campbell is a weak side speed linebacker who's sideline to sideline. You got Trenton Simpson, who is like projects best as the Mike, like a tackle machine at Clemson. Dayon Henley, 6-year senior out of Washington State, who was a converted wide receiver to linebacker, needs to learn the position still better at the NFL level. Question marks about him. Henry Tuiyotu, another Mike kind of guy, but he'll probably end up being a strong side. DeMar Novershone, Noah Sewell, who was a top 2 linebacker to start off the year and has fallen off due to an injury at Oregon. And then not too many notable guys, in my opinion, outside of the 4th round here. And then moving on to some of the cornerback class, I really do like this cornerback class a lot. It's my favorite in the draft class. You got a guy like Christian Gonzalez, who's a mix of speed and size, who is locked down, who has really fluid hips, and who has great recovery speed and ability. The video has already been made of Christian Gonzalez, my prospect breakdown. However, it's coming out on Monday, the 24th, as I'm recording this on Thursday, the 20th. And then you got Devin Witherspoon, who is not only a willing tackler at Illinois, and who is also an incredibly hard hitter. She's basically like a cornerback shot out of a cannon. I really like Devin Witherspoon. And then you got Joey Porter Jr., who who has elite length and flashes lockdown ability as well. He has superior length. He has an 82-inch wingspan, which is larger than Peter Skronsky, offensive tackle. He also ran a 4.46, which is pretty good for what was projected for him. He was around a 4.5 guy, ran a 4.46. He plays in the receiver's hip a lot. He has, I think he flashes lockdown ability. However, not the greatest athletically. And sometimes he will get burnt over the top against really, really fast receivers. Deonte Banks, this is a 10.0 athlete per relative athletic score. Combine, really good at the combine. However, is inconsistent in coverage. But I still think he has a late first round grade. Do think he goes in the first round. Cam Smith is another guy who is an athletic freak. However, also still raw. But I think he's like an AJ Terrell. AJ Terrell was also really raw in coverage. And then you got Keely Ringo out of Georgia, who is an athletic freak. He's 6'2", 200 pounds, and he runs a 4.3. He's known for the pick six in the national championship game against Bryce Young. However, he's really raw in coverage. He's not the greatest at route recognition, and when he gets fooled badly. Look what happened with him against Marvin Harrison Jr. when they faced Ohio State. However, if you can develop him and you can make him more consistent in coverage, Keely Ringo could potentially jump up to like the third best cornerback in the draft class. However, that inconsistency is going to really make him a late second round grade, in my opinion. Tyree Stevenson is a guy who a lot of people are really high on. He's going to be a really good value pick where he goes. He'll probably end up going in the second. Like a star cornerback out of Miami. He was probably the best player on their team last year. Pretty consistent. Another guy who's really athletic. Carl Phillips out of Utah. He's a smaller guy. He's 5'9", around 180 pounds in that area, but probably the best slot-specific cornerback in this draft class. Emmanuel Forbes is a guy that people bounce around, him either being a top 5 cornerback or him being out of the top 10. 166 pounds was a massive red flag at the combine, but, pick six monster, broke the FBS record for pick sixes with 6 in 2022. Garrett Williams, guy out of Syracuse, I like a lot. DJ Turner, combine star again, ran a 4.26, and has, he's over 6 feet, but he's a smaller guy. He's going to be a slot guy, 176 pounds. Travius Hodges-Tomlinson, this is the nephew of LaDainian Tomlinson. He won the Best Cornerback Award in 2022 for, the NCAA. He was really good in TCU. Had a bad game in the national championship, all said and done. But he's a guy that, could go in the second round. Eli Ricks, Julius Brents. Julius Brents, combine warrior. Oh my God, he had a 42 vert. He was first in the shuttle, first in the 3-cone, and was second in the... What was he second in? I think he was first in the 3-cone, first in the shuttle, had a 42-inch vert, and ran a 4.3. So Julius Brents, combine, absolute warrior. And then you got some pretty solid depth pieces like Corey Trice, Darius Rush, and Jalen Johnson, and then Riley Moss. I'm actually pretty high on Riley Moss. Yes, I do have him like 18th because his cornerback class is that good. But Riley Moss out of Iowa, he gets a lot of stigma because he's white, as people will want to put him in the safety position. However, I actually think he could probably succeed in the slot or in a box role in the NFL. He's 6'1". He ran a 4.4 at the combine. He has really good hands. He had 4 interceptions last year at Iowa. I like Riley Moss. He could be the first white cornerback drafted within the top 5 rounds since 2000. Now, after speaking so highly about the cornerback class, I'm going to have to start with my negatives with the safety class. I don't like the safety class really at all in this draft class. Outside of, if we take Brian Branch away, the highest rated safety is a late third rounder, which I think a lot of these guys are also arguable fourth rounders. But, let's start with the positives. Brian Branch, really, really short tackler, only had 4 missed tackles at Alabama in 3 years. Think he has versatility in the box and in the slot, but he's only 5'11", 190. He really can't play free safety. He's not the best at he can't really catch up to any fast receivers because he's like a 4.5 kind of guy, like a low 4.5. I think we ran a 4.57 at the combine. But I really like him in the box and as a short tackler. I think he is a first round worthy player. But outside of that, Antonio Johnson, J.L. Skinner, Jordan Battle, these guys are good enough to be, potential starters. But do these guys, make a Pro Bowl, are superstar players? In my opinion, I don't think so. I mean, J.L. Skinner probably has the best chance. He's 6'4", 206, and more athletic than these two. Jordan Battle, another bad athlete. Do like JL Skinner, due to him being 6'4", 206, having that NFL over. He has that tall size. He could play in the box as well. Pretty good in the run game. Brandon Joseph, Sidney Brown, Jatavius Martin. Sidney Brown and Jatavius Martin, two Illinois guys. I really liked Illinois secondary last year, but these guys are, once again, short and cornerbacks, really. Jatavius Martin is probably, more of a free safety. Sidney Brown is a smaller, like 5'10" slot guy, but he had 4 interceptions last year. Or he might have had 6. Whatever. These guys both had over 4 interceptions. They have developmental traits at the free safety position. I think they're both projected best there. And then in the later rounds, these guys are just... I mean, if I'm a team, I probably wouldn't be drafting these guys super high. Maybe Anthony Johnson at the highest. But like Christopher Smith, I think a lot of people are too high on. He is 5'10". He had a 2.91 RAS. Ronnie Hickman's another guy that a lot of people dislike. But, weaker safety class. And then the special teams, I just threw 6 guys in here, 3 punters, 3 kickers. Jake Moody out of Michigan. Everybody loves Moody. Michael Turk, Noah Ruggles, Bryce Bargan, Adam Kozak, and then Chad Ryland. And that rounds out the 200. The last thing I wanted to break down was my prospect breakdown series on YouTube. I made 11 videos. 10 have came out already. Christian Gonzalez will come out on Monday. But, I highlighted these players. I gave strength and weaknesses, a player comp, film breakdown, their statistics, and why I like them. These are some of my favorite players and some that I have question marks that I wanted to address, like Peter Skronsky. These are some of my favorite players that I highlighted, and I think you guys would really like this video if you go on my YouTube, Big Rigs. But if you guys prefer a written version of those breakdowns, I have them on my Substack, which is, a website, alexanderregan.substack.com, and you could go ahead and read my written versions of those prospect breakdowns on my Substack. And then finally, the last thing I have is my 2023 NFL Big Board, but I have it in a Google Docs. I have, all the players ranked, and you can see their ranking, Clayton Tune, number 9. I have their height, weight, RAS score, and then their final grade as well. This is for every single player in the draft class. But let me know your thoughts about my 2023 NFL Draft Big Board. Now, this took a really long time to make, took a lot of effort, but I think this is a really cool, tool that we can all use. If you guys want, I can put the description in the comments so you guys can view it. I am going to be streaming the 2023 NFL Draft, of course, on my YouTube channel, Big Rigs, and this is going to be one of the main tools that I use when the draft is available. But but this took a really long time to make. But what would make it all better is if you like, comment, and subscribed. I'll see you in the next video.